Maredith, I guess ladies first. So would you like to introduce yourself?
Sure, I'm happy to, and thanks so much for having me today. I'm really excited about this conversation. So I'm Maredith Hannon. I lead business development for WisdomTree's digital assets efforts. I've been with the firm for about 2.5 years and came from a traditional finance background. So I think a big question that people always ask me is, how do you go from traditional finance to getting into blockchain and crypto? And what does that look like from a career pathing perspective? And I think really for me, it was on two fronts. It was first of all, asking the question of, can't we do this a little bit better than what we're doing today? Isn't there a way to make this more efficient, to make it easier for customers, to give new products that are really innovative? And then it's also about the true democratization of assets as well. So coming from an asset management and wealth management background, those are 2 points that have been really, really passionate and really important to me. And I've been very, very dedicated for those over the course of the last decade. And then coming into crypto and blockchain, it's really the culmination of both of those. It's from a technology perspective, and I'm sure, Jacques, you'll speak a little bit about from a security side what that means for tokenization and also just for financial services. But it's also about delivering assets and new opportunities, new investment assets to new client segments and new clients in a way that just makes their lives a little bit easier. And then at the same time, also giving existing investor bases a new opportunity to have exposure to whether it's a new asset class like crypto or whether it's to fractionalize assets that private markets or other types of funds that weren't available in the past, or it's even just being able to do all of the things you can do today on your phone a little bit faster, a little bit easier, a little bit cheaper. We're all searching for that next big killer app that is going to make us just be more efficient in our daily lives. So that is what led me to WisdomTree. And for those who don't know WisdomTree, we're an over $110 billion global asset manager and really are rooted in understanding and developing what our clients are looking for in terms of new unique products. So if you think of, okay, so WisdomTree is a historical ETF issuer. What do they have to do with blockchain? And it's really in our heritage to position us very uniquely to succeed here because we're innovators, we forge new paths, we're a firm of first in terms of new products. And now we're starting to say, how can we evolve this and what can do to ETFs that ETFs did to mutual funds is the big phrase that our CEO and founder tasked us with. And we see tokenization and blockchain as solving a lot of the problems of today, but also enhancing the wrapper and the structure for where investors can invest in tomorrow. So that's a little bit about me and a little bit about WisdomTree, and I'm happy to go into our platforms that we have, both on the retail and the institutional side, but I think we'll cover that through some questions that we'll have.
All right, so what did you say? Make it cheaper, faster, and Halborn, it's about making it safer. So I am Jacques Boschung, I'm the CEO of Halborn. Halborn is a leader in Web3, blockchain cybersecurity services, and we have some, I would say, features which really make us break away from the rest of the pack because we do both Web3 and Web2. We are able to do traditional cybersecurity of the perimeters while having an in-depth understanding of the specific challenges of cybersecurity on-chain. So that's really what we do. And we are a US-based company, but we are globally present, and we are currently serving a lot of DeFi customers, I would say, and you are a kind of hybrid, and we think about TradFi and DeFi. We are serving a lot of DeFi customers, but we are serving more and more TradFi customers, so big banks, which are moving with quite a strong momentum nowadays into that decentralized distributed ledger technology, DLT, and blockchain. And the adoption of all that is about to transform, I would say, the FMI, the financial market infrastructure, very deeply. And we are very happy to be there. And we are very happy to bring that security posture that will enable that transformation to happen. So this is who we are. But as you said, we could go right away in some of the questions that I have prepared for that conversation. And I am very curious to have the position of your position, but also the position of your company on those elements. So we speak about tokenized asset, and we know that by a time horizon of 2030, roundabout, it will be between 20 and 30 trillions of assets that will be tokenized, okay, depending on which analyst you ask, okay? So what are for you the biggest opportunity in that tokenization wave or that tide? And when you look at that, which industries, I'm speaking about your customers, are poised to get most benefit out of that growth?
Sure. So, and I think it's important too to distinguish, especially from a definitional perspective, there's digitization, which is the process of converting physical or analog assets into a digital format. So think about eBay. And then there's tokenization, which is around converting rights or a title to an asset or ownership representation of an asset into a digital token on a blockchain. So these tokens can represent ownership or rights over various types of assets. And I think that's why, especially for finance, there's definitely an interest here, but even for gaming, shipping, governments like the state of California, tokenized car titles, really it's any industry that has a large volume of data that's being shared, stored, recorded, or sent across multiple parties can use this technology really effectively. I think for us specifically within finance, it's really, really interesting because it enables us to provide, and to my points earlier about cheaper, faster, it's also more transparent. It can be more liquid depending on the structure, but there's also a standardization. So what I mean by that is that you can hold a gold token next to Bitcoin, next to a WisdomTree 500 or S&P 500 type of a structure, next to a money market fund, and all of those tokens are on the same utility value chain and can be utilized in new and different ways and also recorded more efficiently. So meaning you can fractionalize those down to a penny. You could also think about just the use of them for payments. So there's all these new applications that I think that's where so many, not only industries, but also specifically within finance, there's use cases where if you say you're going to have the same known counterparty for a trade every single day, this is a really effective way, an efficient way for you to then be able to manage those trades and also to be able to audit them and also be able to record them and share that information broadly or not. So I think all of those are really distinguishers, and I think we'll get into this in a bit, but also through smart contracts and the ability for you to use these if-then types of statements to then process transactions, I think is also really, really powerful, where instead of think of all those manual or pseudo-manual processes that happen today, where you have to go in and click a button, what if this set of rules was met and then this would automatically happen as an action? I think all of that is really powerful as we think about what truly efficiency looks like versus what potentially was built on the back end of Web2 that's actually not automatic. You're able to bring that automation truly on chain.
I am always making the argument that if you look at the banking world or financial services world or FMI landscape, in fact, 3 waves of digitization happened or are happening. So the first one was from paper to centralized ledger technology, which happened in the 80s, 90s, even at the end of the previous century. The second wave was happening between 2000, 2012, 15, and that was, I would say, the wave of e-banking, the wave of private cloud, so the cloudification of the infrastructure of those banks did happen at a large scale. But in none of those waves, the core business processes did change in any shape or form. Mm-hmm. And I am really, I would say, reacting to your statement about smart contract and the fact that in smart contract, we can trigger chain of actions based on real world data triggers, like, for instance, stock market movement and those kind of things. And that's a key transition and transformation of the core business processes of the large financial institution. And that really makes a huge difference. But when you get there, you need to get there in a world that is a converging world, where you have the centralized traditional TradFi world in terms of IT, in terms of toolings, and in terms of how securities are dealt with. And you have this new world of DeFi. So what do you think about that convergence? What does that, what kind of thought do you have when you think about that convergence of those two worlds?
Yeah, I first of all think it's really exciting because I think, to your point, there is this art of the possible on chain that's really, really exciting, where coming from traditional finance, it's very much, we've always done it this way. We've always needed to fax these documents. We've always needed to insert whatever process it was, that it is very formulaic and a lot of that's regulatorily required. But I think bringing that on chain is where you can still have all of that same security, that same regulatory framework, that same risk framework, but then you're able to bring it on chain, where that instead of having it be there's 12 people that need to email each other back and forth, you can make it so that it's once this happened, then this happens, then this happens, in one chain per se, but also in one process that can really easily execute it. So I think what's exciting is the TradFi market and the DeFi market are pushing each other really forward in ways to think about, from a traditional finance perspective, how do you think about risk? How do you think about regulation? How do you think about what's important from a especially bankruptcy remoteness side of what we're able to structure? And also, what are really the best of in terms of traditional finance products, processes, and also just ways to interact with clients, while the DeFi community is really saying, why can't we do this 24/7, 365? Why can't there be a liquidity pool that includes all of these assets? Why can't this all be built into a smart contract? And really pushing from a technology side, but then also a liquidity and a timing perspective of how can we, traditional finance firms, think outside the box in terms of what we've done for so many hundreds of years from a timing or a process perspective. So I'm really excited about that. And I think especially as you start to see with money market funds, more 24/7, 365 types of liquidity, which is really exciting. Instant salability is something that's also really interesting too, as you start to think about access to your capital. So I think there are a lot of convergences, and I'll just go back to the point too around what I think is really interesting and what we've built is in terms of identity. So within identity, we have something called a soulbound NFT that is attached to each of our users' wallets for our institutional platform called WisdomTree Connect. And what's so cool about this is that this really enables you to actually identify a wallet as someone who's been KYC'd. And I think a big piece about the DeFi community is that it's pseudo-anonymous, is that there's no KYCing on a lot of platforms. But now we're seeing more and more come up where, okay, it is important to have a known counterparty to understand who you're trading against. And this new novel way that we've built this, I think, is what is really going to drive us forward in terms of being able to tag, per se, a wallet through the use of this soulbound NFT without necessarily having to go off-chain. So traditional NFTs are transferable. They represent unique ownership and can be bought and sold, obviously depending on market demand. But soulbound NFTs are non-transferable and they're tied to the original wallet. So what this means is that this is really a first step in decentralized identity, where the goal is to manage and own your own identity credentials, where you onboard with us, and then we send you a soulbound NFT that says you are a WisdomTree customer. And that enables us to then also do peer-to-peer transfers amongst our own clients. So let's say that you and I are both a WisdomTree Connect client. We both want to trade our money market fund amongst each other. We're able to do that without having to go directly back to WisdomTree. So what a new unique way of taking DeFi and then applying traditional finance types of products, but with DeFi features to say, why can't we trade amongst each other when we both know who we are? Because we're noted by this soulbound NFT. So I think it's elements like that is what I'm seeing in DeFi that's really interesting, is pushing the bounds of what we've traditionally seen in terms of timing and liquidity, but also in terms of identity and how we're going to see that evolve, where again, it should just be an easier way where you don't need to go back to that central counterparty, even though we're continuously reviewing all transactions and wallets. We're doing that more in the background versus being necessarily in the middle of the process.
Yeah, you don't need to be the middleman. You can review things for, I mean, for governance and for compliance aspect of the transaction, but you don't need to be a middleman. It's interesting what you were talking about, identity. So two things about identity. First, I am always going back to the gospel. And for me, the gospel is the initial white paper of Satoshi Nakamoto about Bitcoin. And if you have the paper in mind, you remember that a big diagram of that gospel was a transformation of identity between TradFi and DeFi. We would not call that DeFi at that time. And it's a totally different approach. So it's interesting what you were speaking about with NFT, because in fact, what you are doing SSI, self-sovereign identity enabled by NFT. Okay, which is, we have this procedure called DID, which is a decentralized identifier, which is one way of doing this SSI thing. But apparently you have moved that to another level, leveraging another type of tokens on-chain. That's very interesting.
Yes, yeah. Well, and we see too this as an opportunity. There's whitelisting, and there's many ways to do this, right? This is what's the beauty of this as well. It's evolving technology, but we see this as also an opportunity to start to think about a network of networks. So how can this be more, again, because DeFi is community based, and that's what's so great about it. It's to my earlier comments about the democratization and the access of these assets, but we also live within a regulatory framework where you do need to be KYC'd. We do need to know who you are as an investor, which I think makes a lot of sense. And so this is an opportunity, though, for us to still have those types of network effects where, let's say that, and then I can trust your DID process, you can trust our WisdomTree soulbound NFT, and it creates a network of networks of trusted people that are then able to build that community, again, without having necessarily a centralized middleman or frankly exchange. So we're really excited about that aspect of it. And also, I think what's really important too, and I'm sure you can touch on this, is more around the security as well, of owning your own, not only wallet and keys, but then also knowing who you're trading with. And we've heard all of these, horror stories about airdrops or hacking. And I think this is also where knowing that there's someone on the other end of this transaction that has been KYC'd will give perhaps some solace. Some in the DeFi community are going to say, we don't need this. Going back to the white paper, it should be pseudo-anonymous. But I do think for at least now, for bridging into or from traditional finance into DeFi, it's kind of the first step.
Yeah, we are back to this convergence point I was making point. So we have this convergence, it is happening, and we have very, very different challenges or attitude toward cybersecurity in those two contexts, which are driven by, I would say, the traditional governance and GRC in financial institution, TradFi financial institution, and driven by very specific challenges linked to the power, but also the weaknesses of smart contract coming from DeFi. So we see those two things now moving along together because we have the cybersecurity team of the banks, but also their compliance team and their risk management team who are faced with something totally new. Okay, so when we speak about banks, they are doing three things essentially now on chain. They are doing so for the primary market issuance, but for the secondary market, trading of security. They are doing then cross-border payment with some kind of digital currency. Many of the tokens that we both know are used for that kind of transaction. And last but not least, in that context, they are doing all those clearing and settlement at a high speed. And we were speaking before that about the speed of transaction and also the reduction of risk because you are fast in the transaction. So when you look at all that, okay, and when you look at what you do in your environment, what are the biggest security challenges? How would you qualify them without disclosing, of course, the well-kept secret of the company?
Exactly. And I would say I totally agree. And I also think that as you start to look at how this can move forward, I think that's where the traditional finance firms, asset managers, banks, et cetera, are also evolving in a lot of really exciting ways too towards the DeFi community as well. To some of the points that I was making, I mean, never in a million years, I think would you have said WisdomTree, a publicly traded company, has a soul-bound NFT, right? 3 years ago, you would say this is definitely some sort of more the fiction than fact. And so I think for especially this industry, I think it is an opportunity to say, how can we think about cybersecurity in a new way? How can we think about risk management in a new way? But also, how can we think about new products too? So even just the accepting of stablecoins as a source of, we have a stablecoin conversion service that we essentially convert stablecoins to fiat to be able to subscribe and redeem in and out of our funds. But even just for us to be able to accept stablecoins as a form of payment through this service is something that I think is really new and different as you start to think about, to your point about cross-border payments, but even just as a new opportunity for funding and what that could mean. And what about the days of, and this is happening now, and I think more and more will become mainstream, is how do you accept Bitcoin to buy some sort of other investment vehicle instead of having to trade out, go into cash, and then purchase it. So I think there's a lot of really cool and innovative types of thoughts along those lines, because if you take a step back, why can't you do that? Why can't I buy a money market fund with gold? Why not? Why can't we just create that today? And I think that's what's exciting too. And then to take it a step further beyond just pair trading, but also to think about what the usability could be too. So we've talked a lot about the DeFi community, but I also think there's this retail investor community too that is really looking for a new way to bank. And a new way to think about their money. And so many of us have cash sitting in a checking account, not earning anything. What if you could spend off of that cash because it was invested in a money market fund and you consistently earned a yield until you swiped your Visa card? And that's what we've built with our retail platform, is to be able to, and it's a mobile-based app if you're here in the US called WisdomTree Prime. That's about, it's all built on blockchain. It looks exactly like any other mobile app that you would have. All of the difficulties of blockchain are abstracted away, that it looks and feels like anything else you have, except you are running on blockchain rails. You have a money market fund that's investing your dead cash essentially consistently. You can then pay for it with the Visa network, but then you're able to also buy Bitcoin. Then you're also able to buy an asset allocation model. You can also buy gold, where it really is that total of saving, spending, and investing that I think not just the DeFi community, but retail investors are looking for. And this technology is what enables us to provide that. So it's faster, it's cheaper, it's more efficient, utilizing this technology to deliver that to the retail industry.
Okay, so it means yield, it means liquidity, and it means high speed for your transaction.
Yes, and payments too. So, and you can pay your monthly bills through it as well. So all of that is really a key differentiator for us too. So it's not just about accessing the DeFi market, it's how do you bring these DeFi principles? And I think this was your point of, I talked a bunch about traditional finance into DeFi. I think there's also a DeFi into traditional finance. How do you take this technology and power what retail investors are doing, and then take the best of traditional finance, mostly products and process, and bring that into the DeFi community to make a better, more efficient financial market, essentially.
But you know, when we speak about convergence, and I think it's almost a common thread in this conversation, we have those two things. So we have the large institution adopting that technology, okay? But they work in their regulatory framework still, Okay, so they are regulated in the same way. They are doing GRC in the same way, and all those kind of things. But we have also the DeFi community with big aspiration to do more and more and to go up the ladder, up in the value chain, and be on the heels of the large traditional financial institution, which means that the DeFi needs to also correct course to some extent and adopt some of the practices, for instance, in cybersecurity, of the traditional finance world. And what I mean by that, I will just give you one example, which comes directly out of the toolbox of Halborn. We have a solution called Seraph. And what does that solution do? It is a smart contract in itself, sitting on Ethereum main chain. And this thing can enable you to do policy enforcement, to do transaction simulation, to do breach prevention, and to have this kind of notary components to make sure that you have some sort of central control of your transaction. Okay, and that solution was developed 2 years ago by Halborn, and we tried to position that to DeFi. No big interest back in the days, but today, because of those two things, we have a big traction for that tool in banks because they see a way to combine centralized IT control and risk management and GRC and all those things we were mentioning in the beginning, together with the agility of having something on-chain. So that's interesting. And at the same time, we start to see also demand from DeFi to look closer at that solution that we discarded back in the day, as I said. So for me, it's a perfect illustration of that convergence happening just in front of us. Does that talk to you?
Yes. Oh, it's absolutely true. And I think even, and again, we've all heard horror stories about people losing their keys or even, being hacked or what have you. This is where cybersecurity, especially with, I'm sure you have so many other, it's blockchain, it's cloud computing, it's AI. We could go in a million different directions. Right. It's absolutely critical and really, really important. And that's why for us too, although DeFi is, pseudo-anonymous, the KYC aspect as well, we think is really important, not only from a regulatory perspective, but just to know who you're trading against too. We've obviously seen instances where folks didn't know who was on the other side, didn't end up in the best way. So absolutely agree. And I think too, as we start to move forward for next year, I think this is going to be a huge, huge focus is not only how to, but in terms of permissionless types of interactions where there's one thing for cybersecurity for a walled garden, and our retail app, WisdomTree Prime, for a lot of reasons is a walled garden, while our institutional platform, WisdomTree Connect, is not. It is third-party wallets. It is utilizing third-party custodians. Like I mentioned, we're sending you an NFT to your own wallet that you're managing. There's obviously still, and that makes a lot of sense for the institutional population of DeFi, and it's really a requirement. But it definitely is something else that there's a lot more considerations when you start to talk about minting on different chains. You start to talk about that peer-to-peer transfers that I mentioned. So there's a lot of thought that goes into it to ensure that the smart contract is also written in a way to protect our clients as well. So it's definitely not necessarily as simple, but we've been able to really abstract away a lot of the complexities to enable these institutional clients to get access to regulated products, which we think is really important, especially with some of the products that are out there in the market that don't have the same types of frameworks.
Right. So yeah, it's exactly that. And what we also see, by the way, we also see an increased demand for Web2, so Web2 cybersecurity services coming from DeFi, which tells us that all of a sudden they are moving into a world where it's not only the smart contract audit, but the entire environment. Okay, so it's a broader perimeter that needs to be watched and need to be taken care of. So that's one of the things that we are seeing, which is really happening at large scale in terms of threat. But we also see those guys paying a lot of attention to the fact that Halborn, for instance, We are SOC 2 type 2, which you would say, okay, a bank would love that. Why would DeFi care? They do start to care about that. We are also, with regard to vulnerability, we are a so-called CNA, which is also important because it means that we are an authority with regard to the blockchain world. So those things start to get a lot of traction. So how do you see those, I would say, characteristics from a WisdomTree perspective?
Those are, they are critical, and we have many licenses as well to be, managed from a regulatory, and also we're, like I mentioned before, a publicly traded company. So it's definitely important for those. I would also say too, to your point, I think more and more of the DeFi community is also looking at that as well. So if you saw, and we put in a proposal for it, but Sky, which is formerly MakerDAO, put out an RFP for a tranche of their treasury to go into tokenized money market funds. And if you look at the questions that they asked, many of them were related to not only security, but also what's the legal structure, yes, and compliance, and a lot of questions around that, which frankly surprised me, but also made me happy, honestly. Yeah. It's something that we do, but I think understanding what is bankruptcy remoteness, what's the legal structure, who has ownership of the tokens, these are all questions that were being asked now that 2 years ago weren't so much on the forefront of anyone's mind. And now I think a lot of those are pretty critical, because as also more traditional finance people come into the DeFi community, they're saying there's a reason why we have this. This is an important safeguard for our assets as we start to look at diversification. So I do think that those points are starting to become more and more important and also accepted amongst
welcome to the grown-up community somehow.
Yes, exactly. Yes, I remember a few years ago they were saying that
compliance is not fun, by the way. That's why it's a grown-up, but it has to be like.
Exactly. A few adults, a few grown-ups, but I completely agree. And I think I'm excited about what the future looks like for next year. I think that there's going to be a lot in terms of not only evolutions of what you were speaking about, and also particularly for identity, cyber, product development, and also truly this convergence. And I think I love that word. And I think it's really an important one of how the best of DeFi and the best of TradFi can be combined together to deliver the best possible solutions. At the end of the day, this is all about the community and also about the customers that are using them. So there's a good, healthy competition to make the best of product, which I think is really great too and very important.
Drive adoption, and people like us, people like Halborn, will make sure that this community and this convergence for both sides of that world is safe. Hey, Maredith, it was a fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed what we have been talking about, and I wish you all the best. I can already tell you Happy New Year almost.
Yes, Happy New Year, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year.
We are converging at high speed.
Exactly, at the end of the year. So this was wonderful. Thank you so much, Jacques. I really appreciate it.